welcome to Curbside Chat. I'm your host, Lorraine Sommerfeld. This vodcast is brought to you by AIA Canada and their fabulous sponsors. It's an opportunity to find out from the experts on the ground what is happening in the ever-changing auto care sector. Today we're talking about the future. The future for an industry that is growing quickly, yet also facing a world that is changing just as quickly. How should businesses be adapting? What should workers, both those in the sector and those considering it, be looking for in a career? My guests today are going to provide a brilliant range on the subject. Mubasher Faruki is the Associate Dean of Automotive at the British Columbia Institute of Technology, BCIT. Mauricio Zelaya is a partner and national economics leader at EY-Parthenon. Welcome both of you to Curbside Chat.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Mubasher, you're hands-on at the teaching and administrative level at BCIT. I want to ask you first, what are the biggest changes you've seen over the past decade in how students are prepared and preparing for a career in the auto care sector?
The biggest change I think what we've seen over the last decade is, the automotive industry is changing faster than any other point in history that I can remember. We used to be purely mechanical, and the trade is now quickly or deeply rooted in technology, data, and now energy systems. So that transformation right now is really changing what we have to prepare our students for. It's just not purely mechanical anymore. There's a lot of other subsystems that are involved with training technicians to be, for the auto care sector.
Mauricio, I'm going to pull the lens way up now and because I want you to speak about this industry from a global viewpoint. Mubasher spoke about on-the-ground changes taking place at the technical or the mechanical level, moving into the technical. From a global perspective, though, how is this industry shifting, and what are the biggest changes coming from?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there are a number of sectors that are undergoing what I refer to as a digital transformation, and the auto sector is one of them, right? From the actual product itself to how to repair them, how to diagnose them, and it's really reshaping how we think about the automotive industry. And because of that, you're looking to understand the different types of equipment that's required, the type of labor that's required on the skill side. So Mubasher mentioned already that you're seeing the different skill sets required. For us, because it is shifting more on the technical bit, you will see now a really competing sectors going at having those with a very particular set of skills. So you can expect labor shortages to arise in the near term. At the same time, just with this whole geopolitical front that we're observing, we believe, and I believe, that it is a structural change, that it's not to say that we'll be less reliant or completely independent from the U.S. or from other markets, but rather it's going to be slightly less reliant. And what does that mean is, will you start seeing capital being reshaped, leaving Canada, entering Canada, and thinking about where those investments are. And so we're seeing this, it's a very dynamic market. And if we take it to a step further and understand, well, where is it that we're going? It's more, we see the uptick around electrical vehicles. That's somewhat slowing down, but you're also seeing a growth on the hybrid aspects as well. So the vehicle years, makes, and models, you're seeing a lot of changes already, and a lot of announcements from global industry players. And as a result, it really flows down to everything else.
Mauricio, you're on the front end of a lot of those changes, obviously, when you're on the ground. We've discussed on previous shows about the clash between traditional roles and new expectations. As we build a new workforce for these new times that Mauricio was referring to, what are the fundamentals that students need? And what are the different disciplines that are maybe going to be competing in this sector now? And I'm going to double up the question here. I want to talk to parents as well. Is there a role for parents? Because we're talking about youth coming into this, and you're at BCIT on the ground level. So what are the different disciplines that are coming in, and what's the role for parents in maybe talking to their kids about this?
Is that a question for Mauricio or myself?
Sorry. No, Mubasher, that was for you.
Was that for me? Okay, sorry. I didn't catch that piece. My apologies. So let's talk about the parents for a second, Lorraine. There's a huge role for parents to play in this, and because right now what I see is that we're still trying to get over that stigma of that the auto sector is a greasy, grimy, that grease monkey mentality. Is that stigma is still associated with that, I think, anyway. We're trying to get parents to realize that the auto care sector is a very viable career. I mean, you're dabbling now with the technology side of things, which is highly complex. It requires, in my opinion, a very high degree of skill sets in order to be able to be successful and, be transformed into that area. So developing those skill sets and making sure that people, generally speaking, are aware of what it takes to be an automotive service technician, right? And how it, someone needs to be able to work on these vehicles, understand all the technologies that revolve around them, is completely changed. And I just wish parents were a little bit more aware of that. Having said that, I would love to see us a little bit, show off that technology side of things, because the general public, I don't think, really knows what's all involved. I mean, we've seen this over time, the evolution of vehicles, but do we really understand what's going on inside of a vehicle? Vehicles today are more like computers on wheels rather than anything else, if that in very simple terms. So that type of technology, I think, can really lead to attracting people into that sector. And I think that's where I'd hope to see us use some of that and leverage that technology to see if we can attract more people to get involved with that, because you need the skill sets involved, that we're going to go about this ad nauseum, are highly dynamic. And once you understand that, it really becomes much more engaging for people to say, yes, you know what, I'd really like to be involved in that arena, because you not only learn, for argument's sake, just electronics or networking. You learn a whole bunch of other things that can be transferable skills if you ever wanted to sort of embark in something else, or just continue on in the automotive sector as an engineer, as an example. So those type of things, I think we can sort of get that message out to parents and the public at large.
I think that's really important, the parent messaging. Mauricio, I know there's a lot of uncertainty on many fronts right now. You mentioned that in your first answer. What do you see that suggests Canada is doing something right? And where do you think we need to be changing if perhaps we're not moving quickly enough?
Yeah, so I think the general direction in which where the automotive industry is going, I think that's where we got it right, that inevitably there will be an element where we'll be shifting more towards electric vehicles or more around hybrid-based vehicles. I think that's right. To me, it's more of a diversification-based question, and is making sure that we are working with many different suppliers, many different automotive companies to ensure that we are capturing the best, and really highlighting to Mubasher's point, the public awareness. And this also comes to even with businesses, right? I mean, at times when we speak to our global companies, they're almost surprised to hear about the labor talent that we have. I mean, it's kind of generally known, but we start getting very specific in terms of certain skill sets. It's still pretty fascinating for them to understand that. And I mean, we've seen and that's why I think it's really important to have what we refer to as these anchor investments. So having those electric vehicle battery plants here is great, but we've known this for quite some time that we can be successful in this area. So there is, to answer your question directly, yes, I think we're getting the direction right. I think everything else is still a work in progress, meaning that it's still supporting the labor side, right? That we shouldn't be having these issues that are arising at the moment. And to Mubasher's point, is the work, there's a perceived view on the working conditions, which is very different. And to be able to highlight that and to be able to speak to the parents or the students, and in my view, even at a younger ages, maybe around middle school, right? That's where you start thinking about these ideas. They wouldn't just be in high school or even post-secondary. Is you start bringing that question, like, look how much this is changing. And by the time you graduate, it's going to change even further. And so you want to be part and right front and center with this change. And to us, we're also seeing, when you're looking to attract talent, let alone develop it and retain it, the top of mind that we always think about is, when you're looking to attract talent, is around alignment of vision and alignment on what you feel is important. And that to me is incredible. And we're seeing that shift more than just a financial perspective as well, to say, hey, you can make a very big difference. Look at all the great stuff we're working on. You can be on the cutting edge on developing these new technologies that are actually feeding into some of these cars and even repairing them or maintaining them. So I think there's a lot of great stuff that's occurring right now.
Mubasher, talk to me about outreach. You started to talk about how we connect with these kids and where. And when we spoke earlier, you mentioned an auto show, which we tend to think of as just go and look at the shiny stuff. But you saw some better things being brought out in that forum. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Yeah, and this wasn't a surprise to us. And you mentioned the auto show. So, as I mentioned, we're trying to use the technology around automotive vehicles right now to at least make the people aware of what it takes actually to be a technician or be working in the auto care sector. And when we went to the auto show, we basically took our EV lab, which is basically a lot of resources, an electric vehicle that's a cutaway that actually shows the inside of an electric vehicle and some of the technologies around a vehicle, a modern vehicle. And to our surprise, well, actually it wasn't a surprise, we were pleasantly pleased to see the engagement level we got, which was just through the roof, because most people at an auto show are going to check out cars, see what's going on with the new vehicles, etc. And when people were walking by our booth and were actually seeing firsthand what an EV battery looks like, what an EV motor looks like, the inside of an electric vehicle and how it works, they were fascinated. I don't know how many times I was asked by parents, younger students, prospective students were saying, wow, this is what I'll be doing if I'm an automotive technician? I said, absolutely. This is what it looks like inside of a car. This is how it works. And the engagement level was fantastic. And then it spawned off into a whole bunch of other questions around, so what does a typical day look like if you're working at a dealership, for example, or at an independent shop? And there was just so much knowledge exchanged in that short presentation. This is why I kind of jumped on that piece about raising the awareness. It was really evident to us that people just aren't aware. We take for granted what we're driving. And when you actually take a deep look at what's involved with that, you start to slowly understand what it takes actually to understand all those systems in the vehicle and how, for lack of a better term, engaging and cool it is. So that piece really it tends to attract, at least with the younger generation, because one of the things that Mauricio touched on also was engaging students in the K-12, for example, in elementary school. And we've taken that away. You see a lot of, and it's probably due to funding. In fact, I'm almost certain that it's due to funding. That element of introducing not just the auto care sector in elementary school, but even trades in general. They're difficult to fund. It takes a lot more funding to actually get a trades program running in the schools than it would a classroom and doing any academic activities. So we're losing the ability to actually get people involved and engaged with what we're doing in the auto care sector and other trades. And I think that's one of the things I wish we could address a little bit more, because if we don't start early, to Mauricio's point, we're missing a huge opportunity to actually engage people. And I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's just a couple of things I just wanted to highlight as we're through this discussion.
No, it does. I'm curious about the outreach and where we should be doing more, and I think you've addressed that well.
Yeah.
And the auto
For
shows.
sure. So definitely, in the elementary schools, for sure, get them early, and then of course that public awareness piece would be fantastic. I would love to see the manufacturers spend a little bit more time in sort of showing off the technologies in their vehicles and what it takes to actually enter that industry in the auto care sector as part of their sales campaign. But that's just me.
Speaking of all that tech, Mauricio, let's talk AI. There's no going back, which is good. So what is the way forward? What advice do you have for tomorrow's leaders in the auto care sector for advancing new tech and for the students?
Yeah, I mean, I always view as AI and innovation for a more broad term, it's there to, from a labor side, to automate and augment, right? That's the purpose, right? So you're looking at, there's some areas in which it's going to help you, so make you do things a little bit quicker, and it's also going to help you support you in other ways that you otherwise won't. And this is true for the workers, it's also true for the companies. And we're at a stage right now at the macro level that there should now be a push, and you're seeing a lot more advocacy on this, is less, and I say less, but in a relative sense, less on the development of technology and more on the adoption side of it, right? I mean, I think there's enough right now that a lot of businesses can really benefit from. And this is, again, speaking more broadly, we've always known that Canada at the aggregate has been struggling in terms of productivity around investments or development around R&D and innovation. And then this all feeds into the third broader perspective of fiscal competitiveness. And a lot of this can be solved, yes, by infrastructure investments, but also even just the adoption of the technology that we have at this moment. This is completely true for the automotive industry, which is growing at great lengths right now, which is fantastic, but it's also for the workers and the people itself. So this is an area where we start thinking about reskilling, new skilling, upskilling, right, in terms of all different aspects, understanding your what type of, how you can use technology to really immerse yourself to help augment your work. Is it reskilling to completely move away from some sectors? I mean, just like in innovation in general, it's called creative destruction, right? I mean, some sectors will grow and will displace others, and that's perfectly fine. That's actually great for a healthy economy to move forward. So for businesses, I mean, that's top of mind. There's this survey that we have at the firm. It's called the CEO Pulse Survey, and this is on a global sense, where we survey CEOs across all different sectors, automotive being one of them naturally, and we speak to them on a quarterly basis. And what we just received on a global and a Canadian side, which I find interesting, is that while we still believe that business sentiment is still relatively low, it's the optimism in which they can operate in this current environment is actually rising. And part of that, what that means is now they're shifting their what I'll call their views, or shifting where they're allocating their efforts less on geopolitical and trade uncertainty and actually more on technology. So top of mind right now is technology, irrespective of the backdrop that we're in right now. So this goes to show you how strong this is, and it should be top of mind for everyone. Short answer, yes, I think everyone should be thinking about this. They're working out use cases at the moment, but it is powerful, and you're slowly starting seeing the benefits of this.
Mubasher, Mauricio brought up skill sets, and when we were speaking earlier, you were talking about the transferability of a lot of skill sets that previously weren't really known in the industry. And I thought it was really interesting. You're in Vancouver, you brought up the SkyTrain, and you brought up firefighting. Can you describe a little bit about what maybe students can be using what they're learning in different areas, and how they're starting to not only compete, but align with each other?
For sure. So let's go back to my point about the skill sets that are required for an automotive technician. So you take electronics, and with the introduction of EVs, that even becomes much more of a stronger skill set they require. You've got HVAC systems in vehicles, you've got computer networking, and the list goes on and on. But when you look at some of the other areas that need workers, one of the things that we found very interesting, this is a decade or two ago when the SkyTrain was being built in Vancouver. And BC, at the time, I think it was BC Hydro, not BC Hydro, but BC Transit was looking for actually workers that could actually service and maintain the SkyTrains and whatnot. And one of the first places they went to looking for those laborers in that sector was in the auto care sector. Why? Because they had all those skill sets that could easily be transferable into their arena. So that was an example. A lot of people may not realize that, fire departments, police departments, they look for a trades qualification. I wouldn't say specifically in the auto care sector, but definitely as part of in the auto care sector, for someone with a Red Seal designation as a viable skill set or requirement of the job description. So these are becoming more and more recognized, that automotive technicians really have a large set of skills that are transferable. And those are just two examples that I know of firsthand where other sectors are looking at. You can also look at it's easy transfer of skill sets into the heavy duty and mechanical side of things. A lot of automotive technicians are being sort of transitioned to that area with minimal upskilling or training required to transfer there. The aerospace industry is even looking for automotive technicians. I know we just had a request from the ground service equipment operators at airports, because all the ground equipment technicians there have a zero emission mandate, and they're looking for automotive technicians with EV experience to see if they want to work in that sector. So those are just a few examples of how sought after automotive technicians are because of their diverse set of skills that they possess.
Mauricio, you touched on this briefly, but Canada is facing multiple threats on multiple fronts. Can you discuss the importance of business retention and attracting foreign capital? I know this is at the root of everything we're doing going forward. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What should we be doing?
Yep, no, and that's the big question, is what I would say. I've been saying this more privately with clients, and now much more publicly, that we've seen this emerging risk pop up over the last 5, 7 years. It just so happens that you combine this geopolitical uncertainty, this trade tension, with a relatively slow economy, and it's just exposing and amplifying these systemic issues we've had. And amongst that has been the outflow of capital. And when we think about this, it starts all around the areas I talked about in the beginning, around productivity, around innovation, and around fiscal competitiveness. That slowly you're seeing a shift in thinking, right? Where it's now, if we have businesses here, how can we retain them, and how is it that we can help them expand? Whereas before, that was more of, let's attract more foreign capital. So that even tells me, it's a very small nuanced perspective. What that tells us is that it's much harder to attract capital to Canada, because at the aggregate we're not competitive. So what's the next best thing we can do? Focus on who's here and retain them and let them expand to the extent that we can. To me, that's a short-term solution. That's almost a band-aid approach. Like, okay, let's keep pushing forward. And unfortunately, what we often see as well is potential poaching of businesses to move within provinces. That's not helpful as well. Like, at the aggregate, the net benefit is zero. So there has to be some change around the fiscal competitiveness piece, which I think that's where there's a big push on that. When you do see an inflow of capital in Canada, as an example, you have to dig in a little bit deeper what that means. And oftentimes it's around a brownfield investment. So brownfield investment meaning that there was equipment there, or there's a large manufacturing plant, someone came in, retrofitted that plant, and then they're up and running. And some may falsely conclude and say, well, no, there's capital coming in. Look at this investment. What I say is, who sold that asset, and then where did that capital go? Did that stay in Canada? Probably not. And so there's a stock and flow of what we refer to as capital, which has changed, where the flow may not tell you all that much, because you may see some dollars coming into Canada, but the stock or the capital accumulation in Canada is actually not quite there. So there's a lot of, I'll call, policy uncertainties there, but amongst many, that what we can do almost immediately is just around the labor side. I do think, and I'm a big proponent of this, we have one of the strongest labor skill sets and human capital in the world. And it goes to Mubasher's point that you're seeing this push-pull in terms of automotives, in terms of skill sets, that some are being attracted elsewhere, and then you're also seeing them being pulled elsewhere for other reasons as well. And so the idea there is, let's retain them, let's attract them, but then even more broadly, we have to think about developing the broader labor force, because this is only going to get worse, especially with many different sectors going through this technological transformation. We work very closely with a lot of clients across many different sectors, and those same skill sets are popping up everywhere, and even in the most unconventional sectors that we don't think about. So we think about like agriculture, where they're using data, and this is a very old example. This is now 5-10 years old, but you're seeing data analytics and optimization on peeling potatoes, right? Like, we wouldn't have thought about that. But you're seeing all these, buckets in there. You see in the fisheries department as well, a lot of these new skill sets that are being used. And so I think, to me, we do have to do something now, because it's going to help the broader question around attracting talent or attracting capital here. First starts with making sure that we have a strong labor force, and if we don't get that right, then it's going to be, not lack of a better term, not fighting amongst ourselves, but fighting for that same pool of talent.
Mubasher, is this a good time? Mauricio's talking about developing the skilled trades, like getting more people involved. What about people who are thinking of changing careers right now? I've addressed, 18-year-olds and mom and dad, okay, because I think that's really important. But what about someone who's 30 or 35? Is this a good time to change over? We used to get people off the tools as they were aging out, because physically it was a tougher thing. Both gentlemen are describing a different world going forward. Is there a good time? Is this the time for people to consider career changes when everything's changing?
Absolutely. A lot of people may just be a little bit, looking for a different career, change of pace, if you want to, and they already have some skill sets that would be contributing to being an automotive technician, for example. So there's never a bad time. Again, people sometimes are not really aware of what skill sets they do possess. And because there's such a variety of skill sets required to be an AST technician, it's really easy for someone to transfer over and change careers. And it's definitely Again, one of those things where the skilled labor shortage is driving more people into those, is looking for more people. So there's definitely never a bad time to start looking at that. One thing that I do find, whether it's worth mentioning, is it does take some time to learn, right? So patience is definitely a key to making sure that, if you can't do this overnight. So for example, when EV started coming into the marketplace, there was the understanding or misconception with that you could just take someone off the street, for example, and turn them into EV technician in, for argument's sake, a year. But what we found, what we prefacing along the way is that in order to make that transition, you still need to have some baseline knowledge around a vehicle before you can make that transition. So back to your question about, is it a good time change? For sure. And what if you have some skill sets? So for argument's sake, let's just say you're an electrical engineer, and you wanted to transfer into the automotive air sector as a technician. You bring a strong set of skills that would definitely contribute to you allowing you to change careers that way. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's an example of how you can do it. And for sure, those skill sets are definitely desperately needed.
It makes sense. How are we making it better for women right now? Because I've been in this industry for 20 years, and Mubasher, you're teaching people. Are you seeing more women? How do we make it more attractive to more people instead of what we're used to seeing?
Yeah, and one thing we're doing there is again, that awareness piece, right? Technology is a big driver. From my previous experience, a lot of women were intimidated by the physical nature of being an AST technician, which is quite simply a myth. Right, but that was just one example of where some ladies were just thinking that just might not be a career for me. It's dirty. There's heavy lifting involved, etc. That's not the case. So awareness, and this is an environment that's right for anyone. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. If you can do the job and you're willing to learn, there's a place for you in the auto care sector, absolutely. And we're seeing, thankfully, we're seeing more and more women sort of come around through, again, awareness campaigns like the auto show that you brought up, where they can say, well, I can do that. I know something about computers or electronics or whatever, and they're the light bulb goes off and says, maybe I should look at this in a way to do this. We're also doing work in the trade discovery sector where we're actually allowing students to come in and sample some trades, right? And making sure that women are welcome when we do a dedicated cohort of trades discovery for women so they can explore different trades. The auto care sector obviously is a big part of that. Making sure that they feel comfortable, answer questions, and then just really showing them what's all involved being an ACE technician and myth busting, some of the things that are associated with you can't be that. Agreed, it's definitely has been a male-dominated industry, but it just doesn't. It never had to be. It was just one of those cultural things that kind of has stuck, and we're just trying to sort of demystify some of those things to make people understand that yes, this is open to everybody. And again, that awareness piece is key to that. If you go back in time, there was a huge pool of, shall we say, K-12 people coming into the post-secondary that we could draw from. It was kind of a natural thing for people to come into the auto care sector. And it was predominantly young males who like to play with cars, right? But now with technology, it's just a lot more about the mechanical side of things. That technology continues to sort of drive people's interest. And I think that's helping us sort of break down some of those barriers.
Mauricio, what role do you see government playing as we move forward in this industry? And should there be a more robust role in attracting talent and investment? What are you allowed to say, we need you to do this so that the rest of the industry can meet them?
I think almost immediately an area is around the Rights to Repair Act. I think that's going to help benefit quite a bit the auto care industry, because it's going to help allow for the automotive industry and the auto care and the aftermarket to really focus on the ability to really repair these vehicles outside of dealerships and kind of break up. I mean, don't want to use the term monopoly, but using just the OEMs. And because of that, I'm a big fan of having the ability to use whoever in terms of choice from a consumer perspective is important, but also it's going to be very helpful and valuable to the labor force to be able to identify and understand those gaps in those markets. And to me, at the moment, it's more focused on repairing than replacing, right? I mean, I think right now you see a lot of replacement and say electrical vehicle type components. It's like, oh, it's a battery's dead, just put a new one in. Is like, is there ways to repair these things, right? And so I think a right to repair from a government perspective, I think will be very powerful. In general, we have seen some precedents in other parts of the world, so that could be helpful. And then in terms of just more broadly, in terms of the labor force, I mean, it is opening up. I think we're seeing that, which is great. So Mubasher is more happy to see that there's more females coming in. The fact that this work can be completed more broadly, and it's attracting different types of talent and skill sets, it's going to allow it to be open to further. So those that may have, say physical disability as an example, right? I mean, before, if the myth before was, oh, I have to lift heavy things and I can't, it's like, no, that's not true. I mean, you can be able to diagnose these things in a very different way. It further opens up that labor force as well. So it's very, very powerful. So I think there's a few areas there. I think building awareness is just, to me, is still top of mind, number one. When we did this work, working conditions was effectively number one in terms of the what was perceived in terms of entering, in terms of being a technician or working in a repair shop in general. And it's just not true anymore, right? And so I think if we can kind of work with that, in addition to where the government can support, I think it's a great recipe for this industry.
This has been really interesting. We've got myth busting and engagement and finding people where they are and teaching people how much this industry is changing and how quickly it's changing. You guys, you've been great. I'd like to thank both my guests, Mubasher Faruki and Mauricio Zelaya. We're taking viewers from one extreme to the other today, but you've both been invaluable in providing some really great insight. I'm Lorraine Sommerfeld. This is Curbside Chat. We'll see you next time.